What's up everyone, Kara Cora here, registered dietitian, and I am back today to talk to you a little bit about a recent conference that I went to. We discussed a lot about probiotics. It was all about your immune system, about food and the interactions within your body and how that relates to living a longer, healthier lifespan. So it was a really interesting conference. I've been to them before. This was presented by INR, which is the Institute for National Resources. I have no affiliation with them, but for any of my fellow healthcare professionals out there, I really like INR because they do present a lot of updated information on current topics. They represent evidence-based material and studies to teach from, so it's all very accurate information, and many other different health professionals can be represented through their trainings and receive CEUs. So for anyone else that has to continue their education, such as myself, this is a good avenue. Before we dive into the topic, I do want to mention, if you guys are new here or maybe you're longtime subscribers, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. We're getting close to that 100K mark. Very, very excited about that, and I appreciate all your love and support throughout all the videos, throughout all the years that I've been here on YouTube. So thank you for that. And also make sure you guys hit the notification bell as well if you want to be updated as soon as I upload and be in my upload crew there to be able to comment first thing when videos are loaded. Locked and loaded. So the one-day seminar I went to was titled Probiotics, Food, and the Immune System. Now that in itself is a whole lot of information to dive into in just an 8-hour day, but we also had a lunch break and things like that. So we kind of just scraped the surface on a lot of these topics. But for myself, it was a really good refresher. It just kind of, I love going to trainings like this because it puts things back in perspective for me and lights that fire within me in terms of my motivation for health, as well as helping others live healthier lifestyles. So this was a really great training, and the purpose of me doing this video for you guys is, obviously I can't restate everything that was in this program. That probably wouldn't be professional of me anyways, but I just want to go through some of the main takeaways and some of the things that stuck with me from the training that kind of left me thinking. So I'm not going to be going super detailed into science of everything because, again, this was a lot of information in one training. But if you find you're hearing different things that I'm talking about within this video that you want more information on or further videos on, please let me know. This training I felt was really relevant to myself, but I think is really relevant for most people. Thinking about your immune system, your gut health is all the rage right now, and just taking your focus from thinking purely about what you're seeing on the outside, the aesthetic, the number on the scale, removing all of that and really thinking about what is going on internally in your body. Do you ever sit there and think about that? I think some of us, we may, if we're having digestive type issues, it's hard to ignore those. But do you ever really sit down and think about, I wonder what kind of stress my internal body is going through? Am I adding to that stress? Am I putting my body through additional stress it doesn't need to be going through? And how is that impacting me? How is that impacting my gut microbiome? How is that impacting my immune system? And how well I'm able to handle injury or foreign invaders coming into my body? How well do I respond to those things? And this is such an interesting topic to myself. I find that I've really been more focused on improving my immune system as a whole this past year. Since I've shifted away from competing, I've been able to shift my mindset and my goals more health focused. And so the immune system is just such a cool thing to study and so interesting, and it's correlation with your gut health. So going right into the conference, she spoke a lot about, and I just want to mention too, give a shout out, the woman who did this presentation was a registered dietitian as well as a PhD. She had a lot of experience through the years, so she was a really great speaker and very interesting to listen to. But first, thinking about what impacts happen on our immune system. And one of the first things she mentioned, that I don't know why this often leaves my train of thought, but thinking about the synthetic chemicals in the environment that impact us. And there's huge links to being exposed to those environmental toxins in terms of our immune system being compromised, in terms of obesity, diabetes, and other metabolic disorders. So our exposure to things such as heavy metals, so mercury, cadmium, lead, arsenic, and other things. And while she mentioned each and every person, if you were to be tested, you are going to have those metals present in your body. That is part of life and living. However, to take it from a place of being at a normal level to a toxic level is where you can see those risk factors for chronic disease occur. So how much control do we have over that? Well, we do have some control over it, right? Because at first you're like, well, what am I going to do? I live in the environment. I can only control so much in my life. But it is interesting to think about that correlation. Also thinking about the air pollutants that you're breathing in and what type of air you're breathing in, whether it's in your home or where you're living and what you live near, where you work, how old the buildings are you work in. I always think about the fact that I work in a building that was built in 1970 when asbestos it's present in the building I work in. So there's just different things that you don't think about your exposure to them outside of beyond your diet. These other things that we can somewhat control to an extent, right? But how are those types of things impacting your immune system and your health? There was also some interesting links there between, in specific to air pollutants they studied and saw an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease and dementia in older women who were exposed to more air pollutants. So just some interesting stuff here. One of the things they also talked about too is something called EDCs. This was a newer term I had not heard of before. Those are endocrine disrupting chemicals. And with those chemicals, in particular phthalates, those have been found to link to, again, diabetes mellitus or DM, I write down in my notes. But so being more exposed to those phthalates in the environment, things like PCBs and other chemicals can increase your risk of things like diabetes. It's crazy because everyone's so quick to say, well, it's either hereditary or it's your diet and it's your fault. But there's all these other things out there that can definitely impact our internal health. In terms of what you can do about it, well, there's being more mindful about choosing things that are phthalate free in terms of like self-care products. I know myself, I've been trying to be good about switching over. I'm not like full-blown hippie yet. I still shave my armpits and all that stuff, but switching over to, phthalate free self-care products, aluminum free deodorants, thinking about the lotions, just the different stuff that you're putting on your body that absorbs into your skin and impacts your body, how that can actually impact your health. I'll be the first to admit that is something I never would have even considered. Probably even 5 years ago, wouldn't have been a thought in my mind how those types of things could impact my health. But they can. So being more mindful of some of the products you're choosing, as well as choosing more fresh foods over processed foods, which seems like a duh statement. However, there is a lot of links with research in terms of the pesticides and your exposure to pesticides and what that puts you at risk for, which is really interesting. So you guys may or may not have heard of the Dirty Dozen. This is something most registered dietitians are very aware of. We often share the website. You guys can check it out. The Dirty Dozen is the top 12 produce items that you should always buy organic because they are known to have the highest amount of pesticides on those items or in those items. So take a look at that list. And if you're able to, purchase organic with those items. But again, I just caution that even when you are purchasing organic, it's no guarantee that it did not get contaminated at some point. So just, utilizing local farmers markets are going to be a great avenue as well for your health. So just thinking about reducing the amount of pesticide exposure you're consuming, they did show, again, some research linked an alteration in beta cells with pesticide exposure. Your beta cells are what produces insulin. So there's your link with diabetes. The study cited that buying organic could reduce your pesticide exposure by 92%. That's a pretty big link there. So by purchasing organic items, you could possibly improve your health, or at least improve your risk for other chronic diseases. Another interesting point too that she mentioned was decreasing your pesticide use at an early age, which I didn't even know about organic food growing up in Messina, New York. I didn't even know about organic food probably well until college, until my 20s. So, and that is just a sign of a change in times. We weren't really talking as much about organic food 20 years ago anyways, but pesticide, there's links to, if you are exposed to pesticide early on in your life, links to pediatric cancer as well as lower IQ rates. So just kind of an interesting thought at how these factors can impact our health in many different ways. So again, I'm encouraging you guys to think beyond your outside body, to think about your internal body and what things you may or may not be doing and how that could impact you. So then we got into talking a bit more about probiotics. And before we get into probiotics, it's important to kind of understand your body and its microorganisms. So we kind of basically touched on the fact that, our bodies are consumed with many millions of microorganisms. And interesting to think about that. She said, we live with 10 times more non-human cells than human cells within our body. So the bulk of the cells within our body are non-human. And our gut microbiome is basically fully developed at 1 to 2 years old. And your gut microbiota begins to develop from early on, from when you're in your mom's womb. From that point on, those types of environmental things that are occurring are helping to develop your gut microbiota and your whole body's microorganisms. So some of those microorganisms in your body have good benefits and some of them have not so good benefits. So depending on what is being produced in your body, some of the microorganisms can actually produce their own metabolites that can excrete products or waste within your body that aren't helpful, they're harmful to you. So it really depends on what your makeup is. And I think that's what's so interesting about looking more into microorganisms in your gut microbiome, and so important for people to think about who are consumed with just looking at the body and the aesthetic. And I'll go back to that only because that's where I personally have been impacted in my life, because I spent so many years just thinking about the outside appearance, the external appearance, looking fit, looking thin, looking skinny, and there's just so much more beyond that. And so if I can help anyone kind of focus more on that internal health, that is what I am here for. So I focus a lot on that. But with that, it's so interesting because everyone's makeup is so incredibly different. We have all these different microorganisms within us that produce different things, that respond differently. So no one person is alike whatsoever. So you can never compare yourself, even if you are the same exact height, weight, body type, hair color, I don't care, you name it. You can never compare yourself to how your health is or how your body responds, how you respond to dietary changes, any of that, because we are all so incredibly different. And that's just something to never forget in your journey, especially if you're on a fitness or health journey. Do not forget that and remove that comparison, because we are so incredibly different on the inside. So I've got some notes here, guys. I'm just trying to skim over some of the highlights. There is something called the Human Microbiome Project that she cited some information from. That's something I kind of want to dive more into reading about. but just generally bringing it back to the fact that there are thousands of bacteria types within our body, and there's different sites for the bacteria to live. It is not just in our gut. However, I believe it's 70%. Well, 70% of our immune system is hosted in our gut, but there are several different sites for bacteria within our body. It's not just our gut, it's our mouth, it's our lady parts, it's our colon. There's so many different areas and sites for bacterial growth, and they actually build their own communities. And she kept referring to it as gut bugs, which I thought was really cute and fun, so I'll probably start using that as well because I really liked it. But we have all these gut bugs within us that aren't even human cells. It's kind of creepy when you think about it a little bit, and also kind of cool. But it just makes you wonder, like, how good are your gut bugs? Are they in a good balance, or are they not in a good balance? And so with that, we talk about probiotics, and the World Health Organization's definition of a probiotic is basically live microorganisms that you consume, and when you consume them in adequate amounts, that is going to offer you a health benefit to the host being your human body. So we really didn't we got into some specifics about different disease states and where a probiotic can be beneficial, and where the research still needs to happen. So in a nutshell, there is still a lot of research that needs to happen with gut health, with all the different disease states and the links with probiotics, and if it really helps, or, she didn't really talk about any harmful side effects of taking probiotics, but there still isn't one recommendation. There isn't a level of how much we need to be consuming, so that still is yet to be determined. If you aren't in good gut health, it's something known as dysbiosis. That is just basically an imbalance of your good bacteria and your bad bacteria. And we have both. Everyone is supposed to have both. You need some of the good and some of the bad for different purposes within your body. But it's when that balance shifts and you have more bad than you have good that you are found to be in the state of what's called dysbiosis. Sometimes you are then diagnosed, and that's typically within the gut. However, again, you do have different bacterial sites within the body, but typically it is seen within the gut, possibly in the form of SIBO, which is small intestinal bowel overgrowth, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Good God, I'm about to talk about small bowel obstruction. Or SIFO, which is small intestinal fungus overgrowth. So those are the two common ones that end up being diagnosed. When you have that bacterial overgrowth, there's some pretty harsh symptoms associated with that. Typically, folks are going to have chronic fatigue, possibly depression. Irritable bowel syndrome could be part of it. Obesity, cancer, colitis, periodontal disease, which is disease in your mouth, essentially. But it's finding this balance between having a healthy microbiome versus an imbalanced microbiome, which for some of us can be really hard to determine. I actually get a lot of people reaching out to me lately asking for help in this manner, that they feel like they're struggling and they need to improve their gut health. So I just want to run through and compare some of the healthy microbiome benefits versus someone in dysbiosis and what you're typically going to see, because commonly people ask me, well, how do I know? Like, what does a healthy microbiome look like versus an imbalanced microbiome? So in a healthy microbiome, you are having less leaky gut. If that's an issue, you've heard of leaky gut syndrome. Your tight junctions are going to be better preserved, essentially. You will have better protection of your epithelial layers, enhancing your mucus production. You will probably have better mental health type benefits because of there's known mental health benefits when you have a good microbiome, because some of that there's that relationship with the brain and the chemicals that are produced, such as serotonin levels, acetylcholine, and GABA. Help with weight control. So a lot of correlations with a healthy microbiome and your weight, and having better weight maintenance. And that's specifically more so a decrease in your fat cell size. So it helps with weight control by improving the actual size and the overall cell length of your fat cells. we see better immune system. So your body is better able to defend against foreign bodies and or injury. Normal stress response. So this is big as well. If your body is able to kind of handle stress, we all have to undergo stressors, and how able is your body to adapt to those stressful scenarios that are placed on the body, as well as modulation of pain, which is kind of interesting. Now, if you have a gut imbalance, you're going to tend to see someone with an excessive sugar intake in their diet. This is very common. This can lead to the overgrowth of bacteria. Overuse of antibiotics, which, hello, I know I was placed on antibiotics for 2 years in high school due to acne. So it always makes me wonder and kind of cautious with my gut health of how that impacted me at such a young age. We also see chronic inflammation if you are someone that's got an imbalance in your gut health. This is common with any autoimmune disorders. Aging, unfortunately, it's just part of aging. The older we get, everything goes downhill, it feels like. Stress, if you're under a lot of stress, lack of sleep, obesity, use of anti-acid type products. So anyone that's struggling with GERD, some of the proton pump inhibitors can unfortunately decrease, well, it's the benefit to decrease the acid in your body in order to help with the reflux. However, by decreasing that acidity, bacteria is better able to grow. So that's another kind of risk factor there too for an imbalanced gut. So in terms of adding in probiotics, that's something to think about in your life. There are plenty of resources out there to make sure you are choosing a good supplement. The market is absolutely saturated. And one of the interesting points too, because I can't talk about probiotics and gut health and not talk about yogurt, she spoke about yogurt, and kind of a great tip that she gave us too was just looking at the ingredients label on your yogurt and ensuring that there were 6 different strains of live active cultures in your yogurt. And I always buy Dannon yogurt, and apparently I haven't checked it yet, but she said there's only 2 strains, and ideally you need to have at least 6 strains there. So something interesting to think about the next time you guys go to the grocery store and pick up your yogurt, check out the ingredients, read how many strains there. You will know it. It'll be L. acidophilus, bacterium. It'll list it all out. Just count those and see if you're getting enough in there. But you can also do other things like kefir. You can do buttermilk. You can do kimchi is great. And that will all help with kind of normalizing your intestinal health, adding in more good gut bacteria to kind of normalize those things. And again, there is no standardized amount out there for how much we should be consuming. I wish there was, but again, we're just at a point where there's just so much new emerging research in this area. This is a topic that really wasn't even touched on when I went to college 10 years ago now. So it's all like coming in hot right now. So then after the probiotic talk, we talked a little bit about prebiotics. I'll just touch on prebiotics. Prebiotics are essentially the non-digested fiber compounds found in foods. These pass through your upper GI tract and they help stimulate the growth of good bacteria. So your prebiotics are the food for your probiotics. So you want to feed that good bacteria in your gut so that it can grow, it can thrive, it can produce more good bacteria. And a lot of prebiotics are found in your whole grains, leafy greens, legumes, artichoke, soy, my favorite, red wine, and honey. Things of that nature. Garlic and onions, great for you. So that was just kind of the general intro to gut health, probiotics. Next, we started talking more about the immune system and inflammation, which was really interesting to me to hear about because oftentimes we don't really think about inflammation. We don't really always know if we're inflamed or not inflamed, right? It's not always a feeling you just know about, but essentially inflammation starts anytime there is some type of damage to the body, some type of injury that occurs. Inflammation is going to occur in your body as a protective response. It's a good thing. It's going to happen as a protective response to kind of start that initial healing process for whatever the injury or whatever the stressor is within your body. So each and every one of us is undergoing inflammation at certain points of our life, certain points of the day. Really thinking about and knowing if you are someone, though, that falls into that category of being chronically inflamed. If you're someone that has chronic inflammation, you are then more likely to be at risk for a lot of other health issues. So we spoke about the different immune cells within our body. There are so many different types of cells that are part of the immune response to keep us healthy, and they all have their own different little jobs within the body, in addition to loads of different organs within the body that have different types of immune jobs, if you will. So some things that can cause inflammation if you're someone that already has elevated blood pressure or diagnosed with hypertension, if you're someone that has elevated cholesterol, specifically LDL levels, if you have elevated blood sugar levels or diabetes, if you are a smoker, if you are someone with that deep belly fat, or also known as the visceral fat, that is going to cause higher inflammation. Your diet is also linked with inflammation. So those with diets that are higher in trans fats, which hopefully, she was saying most companies are trying to remove trans fats altogether. So they actually made it part of the nutrition facts label. That was a few years back now. So you can see what trans fats are in your food, but I guess food manufacturers are just trying to remove it altogether because we all know they're not good for us and we are not supposed to consume any trans fats. But a diet high in trans fats, as well as high in saturated fat, and a diet high in sugar, all linked with inflammation. And any type of free radicals within our body. When free radicals are produced, that causes inflammation, and that occurs with all of us, because if you are out in the sun, free radicals are produced. If you are breathing, free radicals are produced, and if you are eating, we produce free radicals. So we are all undergoing some type of inflammation within our body. Again, it's kind of understanding how much of it we're going through and how well our body is able to adapt to it. And I think I mentioned this before, but also that link there with our gut health and our immune system, 70% of our immune system is located within our gut. So if we are someone that has gut dysbiosis, as I described, you are likely not going to have as good of an immune system. You're going to be more likely to get sick. Maybe more frequently you're going to get sick. And then the more frequent you get sick, you are not someone that can recover and bounce back as quickly as someone that does have good gut health or a good immune system. So we talked a lot about some of the different pro-inflammatory foods versus anti-inflammatory foods. Really, that high sugar intake can be it can cause the inflammation. Like I already mentioned, the high-fat diet as well. Some other things to think about in your diet, and I think it's important to bring up because she brought this up at the meeting too, is gluten. We got to talk about the glutens because this always gets brought up. It's kind of now generalized that no one should be eating gluten, and that is not true. So there are 3 different categories of folks that we can talk about. Number 1 is the people that are actually having a true wheat allergy. And if you have a wheat allergy, then you shouldn't consume wheat. You can't consume wheat because of that allergic response. It's like a foreign invader coming into the body attacking you. So that is going to be a high inflammation response within the body. So that's number 1. Number 2 is if you are someone that has an autoimmune disorder, such as celiac disease, which celiac disease really only impacts less than 5% of the population. However, it is important to note that a lot of people do go undiagnosed from celiac disease for a period of time, but as a whole, it's a small subgroup of people that truly are diagnosed with celiac disease. And that can be done and diagnosed with a simple test. So if you are someone who is wondering, you can get that tested. Now, the third is a little bit more new and recent, and that is what's known as gluten sensitivity, otherwise known as non-celiac gluten sensitivity is what some doctors are calling it. However, I don't believe there are set diagnostic criteria for it yet. More or less, if you are someone that does not have a wheat allergy, you don't have celiac disease, but when you consume gluten, you are not feeling right. Your body is bloated, you're distended, you're in pain, you're suffering, then you know what, you may want to be someone that avoids gluten, and I would suggest working with a registered dietitian to truly weed out what you should and shouldn't have, because we never want to be omitting things that we don't need to omit in our diet if there's not a good reason for it. On the flip side of things, she did mention how folks with gluten-free diets have been found to possibly have higher levels of arsenic and mercury within your body. So we talked about that a little bit earlier, not necessarily at a toxic level, but way higher than the average person, and that's due to the omission of gluten. And then essentially when you omit gluten, everything you consume is rice-based, and that is where those increased levels of metals come from. There's something called the FODMAP diet as well. If you were someone in this avenue, that you could experiment with that. However, again, definitely recommend working with a registered dietitian to experiment with that. It's a very strict, tricky diet. So tricky in the sense too of making sure you're still adequately meeting other nutrient needs within your diet. So just real quick, skimming over a couple other things. She did mention red meat and really promotion of plant-based for good reason in terms of being anti-inflammatory, but not saying you can't eat red meat, just essentially that red meat is linked to higher levels of obesity, inactivity, and they are a bit more pro-inflammatory. So I was just going to see here, some of your really good anti-inflammatory items are going to be things like your omega-3s, omega-6s, and omega-9s. We talked a lot about the ratio of omega-3s and omega-6s. Some of the thought is with the omega-6s, we consume too many and we don't get that proper ratio. And just general rule of thumb or tip there for you guys without going into too much detail is think about your diet and try to consume 2 times a week a source of fatty fish. That is going to be excellent for reducing inflammation, helping your overall immune system. With fatty fish, I thought this was interesting because I eat a lot of tuna fish myself, but she said the albacore tuna only do once a week, but the chunk light tuna is okay to do a couple times a week. So that's a little tuna talk for you. Oh, I crack myself up. The albacore tuna is lives longer and gets really, really big. Whereas the chunk light tuna is smaller tuna, so it doesn't have as much mercury in it. Your fish can get you toxic with the mercury levels, so you don't want to over consume tuna. And I think that's what I have up there is the albacore. And I should be buying the chunk light if I'm going to eat it a couple times a week. You shouldn't be eating albacore tuna a couple times a day. She said once a week.
Because it lives longer, so it's absorbing more toxins.
Correct, and then that's what you're eating. But yeah, your fatty fish, your omega-3s are known as superheroes with prevention of cardiovascular disease, helping decrease your triglyceride levels, may even help with depression. Actually, I did see this with working at a psychiatric hospital. On occasion they would prescribe omega-3s to assist with depression. So just a little food for thought there. Also something interesting, I won't get into details because I've talked really, really long, but there was something new called the MIND diet, which is essentially a combination of the Mediterranean type diet along with the Neanderthal diet. I can't say that word. The MIND diet, as its name applies, is designed to promote a healthy mind, lower the risk of Alzheimer's disease, which it runs in my family, so very interesting to me. It's essentially a mashup of the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet, which dietitians have used for years with lowering blood pressure levels and prevention of cardiovascular disease. So the MIND diet, I won't get into all the details, essentially a really healthy diet. I encourage you to look that up. I could do another little spiel on that if you guys want, but that was really interesting to me. We also spent a lot of time talking about stress management, you guys, and we talked about those individuals who live the longest lives. And I didn't write it down in my notes, but I forget where they lived. They all lived in super hot tropical areas like Costa Rica. I forgot where else. They all had extremely low stress lives, low stress attitudes, just amazing attitudes in life. She showed us the world's longest living woman. Her name was Betty, and she lived to be 122. And she sounded like a total spitfire. She married a rich man, and I don't think worked much in her life, but she also had the attitude where just she didn't let anything get to her, and I think that really hit home with me in terms of stress management and the little shit on a day-to-day basis that I know I can allow to stress me out. And how many years does that take off our lives to do that, to be worrying about that? So think about what types of stressors you're creating that you don't need to create. Don't let it take up your headspace, because it truly can dictate your health and the longevity of your life. So stress management techniques are huge. We also talked about sleep, you guys. Sleep is never... You can't not talk about sleep and its criticalness in terms of your health. And there's a correlation there with sleep and your gut health too. So folks that sleep more have more healthy gut bugs. And another thing is working out. She touched on working out. She's a huge proponent of working out. And again, the correlations there with increased activity levels and your immune system, your gut health, and that still only 21% of Americans are active. Mind blown. And I'm sure most of you here on this channel, because it's Karakori Fit Life, are living the fitness lifestyle. But there are so many of us, if you think about the people that are around you, that are not active and that are not being active and taking that initiative to do something for their health. So it was a lot of information, you guys, a lot of stuff. It was such a great lecture, though. I loved it. And hopefully, even though I just rambled a really long time, I hope that you guys got a few takeaways as well. I just really wanted to share that with you, because this stuff really means a lot to me, and I share it with you in hopes that it'll help you out. So if this somehow reached you today, do me a favor, share it on your social media accounts if you don't mind. Share it with someone that just needs a little pick-me-up today, maybe needs that mindset shift to quit worrying about the damn scale and worry about what's going on with your internal body, because it's so critical no matter how old you are. And the younger you start caring about it, the better your health is going to be for the long term. So I hope you guys enjoyed this talk, and I can't outro for the life of me. I've got outro block. Is that what it's called?
I guess so.
Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.